Did you check the county records? I asked quietly, watching my daughter's confident smile falter for just a heartbeat. After 2 years of watching her parade through my husband's vineyard, like she owned it, after months of being locked away in Shady Oaks while she turned our 150-year-old family legacy into an Instagram backdrop, that single question would shatter her perfect world into 1,000 pieces. I'm Margaret Sullivan, 65 years old, and until 2 years ago, I had a husband who made me laugh every morning, and a daughter I would have died for. Now I have Thomas's grave up on the hillside overlooking the vines, trembling hands from Parkinson's that people mistake for weakness, and a daughter who put me in a nursing home so she could sell my soul. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every story needs a witness, and I need to know mine reached you. And if something in these words makes your heart ache with recognition, hit that like button so others can find their way here too. The Sullivan family vineyard sits in Sonoma County, California, where the morning fog rolls off the Pacific and wraps around ancient vines like a blessing. 4 generations of Sullivans planted their dreams in this red soil. My husband Thomas was the 4th. He died on a Tuesday morning in April, collapsed between the Cabernet rows with dirt under his fingernails and the sun on his face, exactly how he would have wanted it if he'd had a choice. The funeral was beautiful. Emma, my only child, wore black Prada and cried into a monogrammed handkerchief. Her husband Derek stood beside her in his $1,000 suit, hand on her shoulder, the picture of a devoted son-in-law. They'd driven up from San Francisco, where Emma worked as a marketing director for some tech startup, where Derek developed luxury condos that erased history and called it progress. "Mom," Emma said that evening as we sat in the Victorian house Thomas's great-grandfather built in 1874, "you can't possibly manage this alone. 500 acres? The business side? The workers? Dad did everything." I wanted to tell her that I'd worked this land beside Thomas for 40 years, that I knew every vine's personality, every season's rhythm, that the workers respected me as much as they'd respected him. But grief had stolen my voice, and Emma filled the silence with concern that sounded almost real. "Derek and I have been talking," she continued, exchanging a look with her husband that I couldn't quite read. "We could move up here. Help you. Just temporarily. Until you figure things out." Temporarily. That word should have been my warning. They moved in 3 weeks later, and I told myself it was kind of them, that I was lucky to have family who cared. Emma took the master bedroom, the one with the view of the sunrise over the eastern vineyards. "You don't need all those stairs anymore, Mom. We'll set you up in the guest cottage. It's cozier." The guest cottage was charming. Thomas always said so when he'd retreat there to read on summer evenings. But it also meant I was 50 yards from my own kitchen, separated from the heart of my home by a stone path and a garden gate that Emma started locking at night for security. The changes came slowly, like water wearing down stone. Emma redecorated the main house, replacing Thomas's worn leather chairs with white linen that couldn't be touched with dirty hands. She hired a social media manager to update the brand, started hosting influencer events where beautiful people sipped our wine and posed for photos without ever asking how it was made. Derek spent his days in Thomas's office, studying property values and meeting with men in expensive cars who looked at our land like they were already planning what to build on top of the graves. I still woke at dawn to walk the vineyard, still consulted with Rosa Martinez, our vineyard manager of 20 years. But when I'd try to join business meetings, Emma would smile that patient smile. "Mom, you look tired. Why don't you rest? Derek and I can handle the boring stuff." Rosa would find me afterward, anger in her dark eyes. "Miss Maggie, they're making decisions without you. Today they wanted to tear down the old barn, the one Mr. Thomas restored. I told them no, but I don't know how long I can hold them off. The barn where Thomas had taught Emma to ride her first bicycle. The barn where we'd hosted harvest celebrations for 40 years, where workers' children played while their parents danced. Emma wanted to replace it with a modern event space for weddings. That's when my hands started shaking. The doctor called it early-stage Parkinson's, said stress made it worse. Emma called it proof I couldn't be trusted. "Mom, you dropped the coffee pot again," she'd say loudly enough for Derek to hear. "Maybe we should think about someone to help you." I wanted to tell her my hands shook, because I was watching my life disappear. but the words wouldn't come. Thomas used to say I was too patient, that I let people mistake kindness for weakness. Margaret, he'd say, wrapping his arms around me in the cool evening air, you've got steel in you. Don't forget to use it when you need to. I wish I'd listened sooner. The fall happened on a Wednesday morning in October. I don't remember much, just the dizziness, the ground rushing up, Rosa's frightened voice calling for help. I woke up in Sonoma Valley Hospital with Emma hovering over my bed, mascara smudged from crying. Oh, Mom, we were so scared. The doctor says you hit your head pretty hard. And with the Parkinson's, living alone just isn't safe anymore. I don't live alone, I managed. I live with you. Something flickered in her eyes, gone too fast to name. Mom, Derek and I can't watch you 24/7. We found the most wonderful place, Shady Oaks. It's not a nursing home, it's a senior living community. Beautiful grounds, full-time nursing staff, activities. You'll make friends. Derek appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. I've already spoken with the director. They have a room available. We should move quickly before someone else takes it. I don't want to leave the Vineyard, I said, but my voice came out small and confused. Exactly what they needed to hear. It's just temporary, Emma promised. The same way she'd promised their move was temporary. Just until you're stronger. Shady Oaks Assisted Living was 40 minutes away. Far enough that the Vineyard felt like another world. My room overlooked a parking lot. Not the vines that had been my morning view for 40 years. The walls were beige, the furniture generic. The only personal touch a single photo of Thomas that Emma had chosen. One where he looked old and tired, instead of the vibrant man I'd loved. The staff was kind but busy. The residents were pleasant but strangers. And I was alone in a way I'd never been, even after Thomas died, because at least then I'd had the land, the work, the purpose. Emma visited once a week, always with her phone out, taking selfies in my room with captions like, checking on Mom to a family first. She'd talk about the Vineyard like it was hers, about the exciting changes they were making, about the opportunities Derek was exploring. What kind of opportunities? I asked. Oh, just some investors who are interested in the property. Nothing for you to worry about, Mom. You just focus on getting better. But Rosa found ways to call me when Emma wasn't monitoring my phone. Her voice would drop to a whisper, Spanish accented and urgent. Miss Maggie, they're having parties every weekend, charging $200 a ticket, using Mr. Thomas's private cellar, the bottles he was saving. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the phone. The 1985 vintage? Silence. Then, I'm so sorry, Miss Maggie. They sold 3 bottles last weekend to some businessman from Los Angeles who didn't even appreciate what he was drinking. The 1985 vintage. The year Emma was born. Thomas had made that wine with tears of joy in his eyes, had sworn we'd open it together at Emma's wedding, at the birth of her first child, at moments that mattered. He'd kissed each bottle before storing it, whispering blessings I couldn't quite hear. Emma had sold it to strangers for Instagram content. Something shifted in me that night, there in my beige room that smelled like industrial cleaner and defeat. I wasn't sad anymore. I was awake. I remembered something Thomas had told me 3 years before he died. We'd been sitting in his office, the one Derek now occupied, and he'd been quiet for a long time, staring at papers spread across his desk. I'm worried about Emma, he'd said finally. She loves the idea of this place, the romance of it. But she doesn't love the work. She doesn't understand that land like this isn't wealth, it's responsibility. She's young, I'd said. She'll learn. Thomas had looked at me with those eyes that had seen 40 harvests, 40 seasons of coaxing life from difficult ground. Margaret, I need you to promise me something. If I die first, if Emma ever tries to sell this land or turn it into something it's not, you fight her. Fight for the people who actually built this place with their hands and hearts. How would I fight our own daughter? He'd smiled, sad and knowing. I've made arrangements. Insurance policies. You'll understand when the time comes. Just promise me you won't let your kindness make you weak. I'd promised. Then I'd forgotten. Buried under grief, and Emma's concerned smiles and my own desire to believe my daughter loved me more than she loved money. Now, sitting in Shady Oaks with the taste of institutional dinner still in my mouth, I remembered. Thomas had made arrangements. He'd always been 3 steps ahead, planning for contingencies I couldn't imagine. And he'd left me clues. I waited until midnight, when the nurses made their last rounds, then pulled out the small address book I'd hidden in my nightstand. Thomas had been old-fashioned, kept important numbers written by hand. I flipped through pages until I found what I needed. Father Miguel, our family priest, not his church number, but his personal cell, written in Thomas's careful script with a small cross beside it. Father Miguel answered on the 3rd ring, voice heavy with sleep. "Hello? Father? It's Margaret Sullivan. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to ask you something. Did Thomas ever leave anything with you? Something he wanted me to have?" A long pause. Then, "Maggie? Are you somewhere safe? Somewhere you can talk freely?" "I'm in a nursing home 40 minutes from my own land, Father. I'm as alone as I've ever been." "Good," he said. And I heard rustling, the sound of him sitting up. "Thomas gave me a key 3 years ago. He made me promise not to give it to you unless you asked for it directly, in your own words, with no one pressuring you. He said if you ever needed it, you'd know to call me." My heart hammered against my ribs. What does the key open? Safe deposit box at the Sonoma County Courthouse. Box 247. Thomas registered it under both your names, but the only key he kept, he gave to me. He said inside you'd find everything you needed to protect his legacy. Can you bring it to me? I'll be there tomorrow morning, Maggie. And I'll bring my lawyer daughter with me. Something tells me you're going to need her. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my narrow bed watching the parking lot lights paint shadows on my ceiling, thinking about the man who'd loved me enough to plan for betrayals I couldn't imagine, who'd protected me even from the grave. Father Miguel arrived at 9 a.m. with a woman in her mid-30s wearing a charcoal pantsuit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Margaret Sullivan, this is my daughter, Elena Chen. She specializes in estate law." Elena shook my hand firmly, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Mrs. Sullivan, before we open whatever's in that box, I need to understand your situation. Your daughter has legal power of attorney?" "Yes. I signed it in the hospital after my fall. I was confused, and she said it was just to handle bills while I recovered." Elena's jaw tightened. "And has she filed for conservatorship? Declared you mentally incompetent?" "I don't know. Maybe. She keeps saying I'm confused, that the Parkinson's affects my thinking, but it doesn't. It's just my hands, my movement. My mind is clear." "Good. We'll need to document that. But first, let's see what your husband left you." At the courthouse, the clerk led us to the vault. My hands shook so badly that Father Miguel had to insert the key. Inside the long metal box lay a manila folder, and on top of it, a letter in Thomas's handwriting. "My dearest Margaret," I read aloud, tears already blurring the words. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. And something has gone very wrong. You've always been the kindest soul I've ever known. And I've loved you for that kindness every day of our marriage. But kindness isn't weakness, love, and I need you to remember your strength now." Inside this folder is a second will, properly filed and notarized, unknown to Emma. The first will, the one she knows about, leaves everything to her directly, but this second will contains conditions that override the first if certain triggers occur. If Emma attempts to sell the vineyard, develop it, or remove it from agricultural use within 5 years of my death, ownership automatically transfers to the Sullivan Vineyard Legacy Trust. This trust designates Rosa Martinez as primary steward and divides profit shares among our 12 longest-serving workers and their families. I don't want to believe Emma would betray everything we built, but I've seen the way Derek looks at our land, like it's just numbers on a balance sheet. I've heard Emma talk about her inheritance like it's money waiting to be cashed in, not a living legacy requiring sacrifice and love. Fight for this place, Margaret. Fight for the people who actually bled for it. And remember, you're a Sullivan by marriage and by choice. That means you don't quit and you don't bow to bullies, even when those bullies are your own blood. With all my love, forever your Thomas. Elena had been reading over my shoulder. Now she carefully lifted papers from the folder, examining each one. This is extraordinarily well done, she said quietly. Filed with the county 3 years ago. Proper witnesses. Notarized. Legally bulletproof. Mrs. Sullivan, did you know about this? No. Thomas said he was updating paperwork after his heart scare. But I didn't read the details. I trusted him. He trusted you too, Father Miguel said gently. Trusted you to be strong when it mattered. Elena pulled out her laptop. I'm checking county records right now for any recent filings regarding your property. Let's see what your daughter's been up to. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her expression darkening with each click. Oh, Emma's been busy. Very busy. Preliminary sale contract filed 6 weeks ago with Horizon Development Corporation. Purchase price $4,2 millions. Conditional on successful transfer of title and zoning change from agricultural to mixed-use residential commercial. The room tilted. She's selling it? Already? Not just selling it. They want to put in a luxury resort. Spa, hotel, restaurant, retail village. The Vineyard would be decorative landscaping at best. More likely, they'd tear it all out for parking. I closed my eyes and saw Thomas's face the day we'd planted the newest section of Pinot Noir, his hands gentle with the fragile rootstock, his voice murmuring encouragement to plants that couldn't hear him but seemed to thrive anyway under his attention. Saw 40 years of harvest mornings, of workers singing in Spanish while their hands moved through the vines, of Rosa teaching her children to respect the land that fed them. Saw it all paved over for a hotel gift shop. When is the final signing? I asked. Voice steady now, hands still for the first time in months. Contract indicates next Tuesday, 10 a.m. at the law offices of Morrison and Blake in Santa Rosa. All parties present, including Derek Wright as co-signer, since he's technically on the title through marriage. But not me? You weren't mentioned. Presumably because your daughter assumed you're incompetent and wouldn't understand the proceedings anyway. I looked at Elena Chen, this fierce young woman who had her father's kind eyes and apparently her mother's legal mind. Can you be my attorney? Can we stop this? She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. Mrs. Sullivan, I would consider it an honor. Your husband created a legal masterpiece, and I intend to execute it flawlessly. They're about to learn that underestimating quiet women is the most expensive mistake of their lives. We spent the next 3 days preparing. Elena petitioned the court to invalidate my power of attorney, citing coercion and my documented mental competence. She gathered statements from my doctors confirming the Parkinson's affected only my motor control, not my cognition. She contacted Rosa and 11 other Vineyard workers, all of whom submitted affidavits describing Emma and Derek's neglect of the land and exploitation of the business. Father Miguel visited daily, sometimes just sitting with me in silence, sometimes praying in Spanish, while I held Thomas's letter like a lifeline. On Monday evening, Elena called. Everything's in place. Tomorrow, they're expecting to sign papers that make them millionaires. Instead, they're going to discover that greed has consequences. How are you feeling? Nervous, I admitted. She's still my daughter. Part of me hopes she'll have some reasonable explanation, that this is all a misunderstanding. And if it's not? I thought about the 1,985 vintage, sold for cash to strangers. Thought about Thomas's private office ransacked for profit projections. Thought about Rosa's voice on the phone, scared she'd lose the only job she'd ever loved because my daughter saw workers as expenses to minimize. If it's not, I said, then she needs to learn the lesson Thomas tried to teach her, and I was too soft to enforce. Some things aren't for sale, no matter the price. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect harvest weather. Father Miguel drove me to Santa Rosa, Elena meeting us in the parking garage of Morrison and Blake's steel and glass tower. I wore the navy dress I'd worn to Thomas's funeral, and my hands were trembling but my spine was straight. Remember, Elena said as we rode the elevator to the 12th floor, you don't have to say much. I'll handle the legal elements. But when the moment comes, when they realize what's happening, you'll need to stand firm. Can you do that? I touched the letter in my purse. Thomas's last words to me. I can do that. The conference room was all windows and modern art, a view of Sonoma County spread out below like a map of someone else's life. Emma sat at the long table. Hair perfect. Makeup flawless. Wearing cream silk that probably cost more than Rosa made in a month. Derek beside her, already signing preliminary papers. Two men I didn't recognize. Horizon Development's representatives, laughing at something Derek had said. Emma looked up when we entered, her smile freezing. Mom? What are you doing here? Father Miguel, I don't understand. Good morning, Emma. Derek. I took the seat directly across from my daughter, Elena sitting beside me, like a warrior ready for battle. I'm here because this is still my property, and nobody sells it without my signature. Derek leaned forward, voice patronizing. Margaret, I know this is confusing, but Emma has power of attorney. We're handling everything so you don't have to worry about complicated business matters. Mr. Wright, Elena said calmly, opening her briefcase. I'm Elena Chen, Mrs. Sullivan's attorney. That power of attorney was obtained under duress, and has been invalidated as of yesterday afternoon. My client is fully competent and in complete control of her faculties and her property. One of the Horizon men cleared his throat. I'm sorry, but we have a valid contract here. If there's some family dispute, perhaps you should settle it privately, and reschedule when everyone's on the same page. Oh, we won't need to reschedule, Elena said, sliding documents across the table, because there won't be a sale. Mrs. Sullivan's husband filed a secondary will 3 years ago, with conditions that have now been triggered. Emma's face went white. That's not possible. I have Dad's will. Everything comes to me. You have a will, I said quietly, finding my voice. Thomas's strength flowing through me like vintage wine. Not the will. Did you really think your father would let you destroy everything he built? That he didn't see who you'd become? Mom, I don't know what they've told you, but did you check the county records, Emma? The room went silent. Even the lawyers stopped shuffling papers. What? Emma whispered. Did you check the county records before you started selling your father's wine? Before you turned his legacy into an Instagram set? Before you put me in a home so you could cash in his life's work? Derek stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. We have a legally binding contract. Your delusional mother can't just sit down, Mr. Wright. Elena's voice cracked like a whip. My client's husband, Thomas Sullivan, filed a conditional will in accordance with California Probate Code Section 6110. This document, properly executed and witnessed, stipulates that any attempt to sell, develop, or substantially alter the agricultural use of the Sullivan family vineyard within 5 years of his death results in automatic transfer of ownership to the Sullivan Vineyard Legacy Trust. She slid another paper across the table. This trust designates Rosa Martinez as primary manager and distributes profit shares among the 12 longest-serving vineyard employees and their families. The trust is irrevocable, fully funded, and as of your filing that preliminary sale contract 6 weeks ago, officially activated. Emma's hands shook now, trembling like mine did when the Parkinson's was bad. You can't do this. The vineyard is mine. Dad left it to me. He left you the chance to love it the way he did, I said. And my voice didn't shake at all. You chose to sell it instead. Your father knew you might. That's why he protected it from you. You poisoned him against me. Emma's voice rose, shrill and desperate. You were always jealous that he loved me more. This is revenge, because you know I'm the real Sullivan. Not you. The words should have hurt. A year ago, they would have shattered me. But I'd had 2 years of watching my daughter prove who she really was, and grief had burned away everything except the truth. The real Sullivans, I said softly, are Rosa and her crew, who cry when the spring frost threatens the vines. They're the seasonal workers who come back every year because they love this place, not what they can extract from it. They're your father, who died with dirt under his nails because he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. You're a Sullivan by blood, Emma, but you stopped being one in your heart a long time ago. One of the Horizon representatives stood. Gentlemen, this clearly isn't happening today. We'll need to review these documents with our legal team. If what she's saying is accurate, the property isn't actually available for sale. Derek grabbed the man's arm. Wait, we can figure this out. The old lady doesn't know what she's signing. We can have her declared incompetent. Medical records showing dementia. We'll say she's being manipulated by. Be very careful with your next words, Mr. Wright, Elena said. Ice, in every syllable. My client has been medically evaluated by 3 independent physicians. Attempting to fraudulently declare someone incompetent is a felony in California. So is elder abuse, financial exploitation, and falsifying medical records. Would you like me to continue, or would you like to shut up and let the adults talk? Emma's face crumpled. Real tears now. Not the Instagram-ready kind. Mom, please. This isn't about the money. Derek and I had plans. We were going to start over, build something of our own. The vineyard was supposed to be our foundation. Then you should have built it the way your father taught you, I said. With your hands in the dirt and respect in your heart. Not by selling his memory to developers who'll pave it over for profit. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Contracts voided. Horizon Development representatives tight-lipped and furious. Derek stormed out without looking back, already on his phone with lawyers, who would tell him what Elena had already made clear. Thomas's will was ironclad, and greed was expensive. Emma lingered at the door, mascara streaking her perfect face. I'm still your daughter, she said, voice small and lost. Doesn't that mean anything? I stood, my trembling hands gripping the back of my chair for support. It means everything, Emma. That's why this breaks my heart. But being my daughter doesn't give you the right to destroy your father's soul. When you're ready to work in the vineyard instead of selling it, when you can name the vines by their personalities and cry over a frozen spring, when you love the land more than the idea of the land, come find me. Until then, you're welcome at Thomas's grave. But not in his house. Father Miguel drove me back to the vineyard that afternoon. Rosa met me at the gate, tears streaming down her weathered face, and behind her the whole crew, 12 families whose lives Thomas had protected even from death. Miss Maggie, Rosa said, pulling me into a fierce hug. We thought we'd lost this place. Lost everything. My husband was a stubborn man, I said, looking up at the house where 4 generations of Sullivans had loved and argued and made wine that tasted like the earth itself. He wasn't going to let some developer's check erase all that stubborn work. We walked the vineyard together that evening, Rosa and I and the workers who were now co-owners of the legacy they'd always tended. The vines were heavy with fruit, almost ready for harvest, and the setting sun turned the hills gold and crimson like a promise that some things, if you fight for them, endure. I found Thomas's grave as darkness fell, there on the hillside he'd chosen, where he could watch over his vines forever. Someone, probably Rosa, had left fresh flowers. I sat in the grass, my hands finally still, and pulled out the letter I'd read 100 times since Father Miguel gave me that key. I fought for it. I whispered to the man who couldn't hear me but whose love still sheltered me like the fog shelters the vines. I was kind, but I wasn't weak. Just like you always said. The wind moved through the vineyard, rustling leaves in a sound that could have been applause or could have been Thomas laughing, proud of the steel he'd always known I possessed. 6 months later, Emma sent a letter. Not a text, not an email, but a handwritten letter on paper that smelled faintly of the lavender she used to pick as a child. She was divorced, living in a small apartment in Sacramento, working as a marketing consultant. Derek had left her the moment the money disappeared, exactly as predators do when prey stops being easy. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't make excuses, just said she was sorry, that she'd been lost in a dream of easy wealth and Instagram perfection, that she was trying to find her way back to the person her father had loved. If you'll let me, she wrote, I'd like to come help with harvest this year. Not as an owner or an heir, just as someone who owes a debt to the land and the man who gave me everything I squandered. I don't expect you to trust me. I just want the chance to earn back the Sullivan name. I showed the letter to Rosa, who read it twice, her expression unreadable. What do you think, Miss Maggie? Can people change? I don't know, I said honestly. But Thomas always said the vines teach you patience, that you can't rush growth. You can only create conditions where it's possible, and wait to see what happens. So she comes for harvest? She comes for harvest. Working, not posing. Learning, not performing. And we'll see if my daughter remembers how to love something more than she loves herself. Emma arrived the first morning of harvest in old jeans and her father's work shirt that she must have kept. Her hands were soft, her back unused to bending, and by noon she had blisters and sunburn. But she didn't quit, didn't complain, just worked beside Rosa's daughter and the seasonal crew, learning the rhythm that had shaped 4 generations of Sullivans. That evening, filthy and exhausted, she found me on the porch where Thomas and I used to watch the sunset. She didn't ask to sit, just stood there, waiting for permission that I finally granted with a gesture. "I sold the 1985 vintage," she said quietly. "The wine Dad made the year I was born. I didn't even remember what it meant. Just saw numbers on a bottle. I know. I can't undo that. Can't undo any of it. But I want you to know I understand now what I destroyed. It wasn't money or property. It was love in a bottle. Memory you can taste. And I treated it like merchandise. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in years, and saw past the Instagram polish to someone raw and real and broken in ways that might, possibly, heal stronger. Your father left you something," I said. "Not in the trust, not in the will. Something he made me promise to give you, but only when you were ready to understand it." I went inside and returned with a dusty bottle, the last of the 1985 vintage, the one Thomas had hidden away with my name on it. He told me to save this for the day you came home. Not to the vineyard, but to yourself. Not the easy daughter with all the answers, but the real one who was brave enough to admit she'd been lost. Emma's hands shook as she took the bottle. "I don't deserve this." "No," I agreed. "But your father loved you anyway. That's what parents do. We love you through the worst of you, and hope you find your way back to the best." We opened it together, that bottle of sunshine and grief and hope, and the wine tasted like everything we'd lost, and everything that might still be saved. It tasted like the dirt under Thomas's nails and the patience in Rosa's hands, and the steel in my spine that I'd forgotten I possessed. It tasted like redemption, which is always more complex than revenge, harder won, and deeper rooted. If you're still listening, wherever you are in this world, I hope you remember this. Kindness isn't weakness, but it also isn't surrender. Love your people fiercely, but love yourself and your values more. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time, but leave the door open for them to become someone better. Your presence here, reading these words, means more than you know. If this story gave you something, courage or clarity, or just company in your own battles, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your truth, and I promise someone will witness it. And if you want to sit with me again, on this porch where the fog rolls in and the vines whisper their secrets, hit that subscribe button. Some stories take time to tell, and I've got a lifetime of them, aged in oak, and ready for sharing. The vineyard is still here, the workers still sing in the morning, and I still wake with the sun, hands trembling but heart steady, grateful for every day Thomas's love protects us from beyond the grave. Some legacies can't be bought or sold. They can only be tended, honored, and passed to people who understand that the richest thing you can inherit isn't money. It's knowing what's worth fighting for.